The ship of Theseus is a nearly 2,000-year-old thought experiment that still intrigues people to this day. The premise is that you begin with a wooden ship, but over time, various boards from the ship get replaced. At what point is it no longer the original ship, or can you replace every single component and still consider it to be that original same boat? It's a philosophical question that doesn't really have a definitive answer. However, what if we change the experiment so that it's no longer a ship, but rather it is you? If you were fully disassembled and reassembled, would you still be the same person? And regardless of the philosophical implications surrounding the nature of being and consciousness of humans, would you even want to subject yourself to that torture? And more importantly, is this technology even possible? Well, no, of course it's not. But let's dive deeper, shall we? The beginnings. The use of the words teleport and teleportation date back all the way to at least 1878. Despite being a popular convention of science fiction, it wasn't until the original Star Trek series that it really rose to prominence in the public consciousness. Who can forget all the iconic scenes of Captain Kirk pressing his communicator and saying, "Beam me up, Scotty," something that was actually never said in the show, since Mr. Scott was the chief engineer and usually had better things to do than operate the teleporters himself like a plebeian. But put those pedantic ramblings aside, it's important to note that despite being such a main part of the show, the teleporters were never intended to exist. They were actually a late addition to cut down on costs and the amount of wasted time showing scenes of either the Enterprise or a shuttle landing on a new planet. And then Star Trek Enterprise came along, and you know what they thought? They thought we could bore people with extended sequences of shuttlecraft because they looked good. Up until filming began, the intention was for the crew to just fly a shuttle down each time, but the model wasn't ready in time, so the teleporters were introduced instead. The fact that they were never intended to be a part of the show is a good indication that they probably weren't very well thought out. From cell phones to cloaking devices, Star Trek has been a source of inspiration for researchers and inventors, yet little work has been done with regards to teleporters. Is it because the technology is impossible? Well, yeah, probably. But there's another issue with the way teleporters work, and it's the reason that you would definitely never want to step inside one of these fucking death machines. Teleporter design. Even looking only at Star Trek canon, the inner workings of a teleporter are inconsistent. Despite this, we have an understanding of how they at least are generally supposed to work. The teleporter essentially takes a snapshot of every particle in your body down to the subatomic level and then rips it all apart. You're then rebuilt atom by atom at the target location. And this is already where the inconsistencies begin. It's generally unclear whether or not the original matter is being transmitted via the transporter beam to be reassembled, or whether only the information is being sent and the person or object is being assembled using stray atoms that exist in the area. The most common interpretation is that the matter is being physically transported in the beam, which is why transporters don't work if the ship's shields are on. Except when they do, because the plot needs to happen. However, since there have been inconsistencies where a transporter malfunctioned and created two copies of the person being transported, it stands to reason that they may just be using ambient particles instead. After all of the molecules from one human body couldn't possibly create two identical full-sized humans. Now look, regardless of which way this is allegedly being accomplished, the end result will be the same. Your body is ripped apart atom by atom, and then a copy of you is built somewhere else. It is a process that inexplicably only takes seconds, despite creating a perfect clone complete with all the original person's memories. Oh yeah, and it also recreates the clothes and all of the super complicated electronics that always function perfectly after a transport. And to be honest, it's kind of fair, because recreating a phaser or a communicator is likely to be a lot less easier than recreating a human brain with its memories intact. Why this will never happen? There are so many problems with the concept of teleportation. Let's assume you're just trying to travel a short distance, like from an orbiting spaceship to the planet's surface. By minimizing the range, this reduces how long the process would take, as the matter still needs to move through space and is thus bound by the speed of light. Over such short distances, this issue would be relatively negligible. Let's assume the more traditional approach to teleportation, in which you are broken down and that physical matter is transported. According to research from the US Air Force Research Laboratory, because of course the military would be interested in this technology, it showed that to dematerialize a human body would require 330 megatons of energy. The process would also involve heating the person to 1,000,000 times the core temperature of the sun, a temperature required for quarks to lose their binding energy and become massless so they could be beamed at the speed of light. And already this is starting to sound, well, less than pleasant for the person being teleported. But what exactly is 330 megatons of energy? That comes out to roughly 385 million megawatt hours, which is the complete annual output of about 75 nuclear power stations. This is, as you imagined, a massive amount of energy, and we haven't even tried to put you back together yet. First, we have to get you to your desired location, and honestly, good luck with that. The problem with trying to beam matter is that it is matter, and matter has this nasty tendency to interact with other matter. Even breaking down everything into massless quarks, there's a good chance that all of that matter that once made up you isn't going to arrive intact. Now, for the sake of argument, let's just say that all the little particles that used to be you have safely beamed from the planet's surface to the transporter room. At this point, we encounter a number of issues that have already been addressed on this channel in other topics. First of all, there's the human brain, which is really complicated. We are nowhere near the ability to upload human consciousness into a machine, and given the way transporter technology works, that would be one of the many prerequisite baby steps required to make this happen. Not only would we need to be able to scan a perfect copy of your brain remotely, but rather than replicating it digitally, would have to rebuild it atom by atom. The same is true of your entire body, and that is just an absolutely massive amount of information that would need to be transferred. An adult human's body is made up of roughly 37.2 trillion cells. Each cell contains 100 trillion atoms. According to research published by the Journal of Physics Special Topics, the total amount of information that would need to be transferred is 2.6 tredecillion bits. Since you've probably never heard of that word before, that's 2.6 times 10 to the power of 42 bits of information that would need to be transferred. It's a lot. It's really a lot. So, how long would that take? With current technology, it's going to take a while. The standard for satellite communications is the 30 gigahertz microwave band. That's not to say higher bandwidth solutions won't be implemented, but the improvements would need to be utterly ridiculous. Without current technology, transmitting that amount of data would take 4.85 quadrillion years, which is about 350,000 times longer than the universe has existed. This would require our existing storage and transfer capability to multiply 100 times per decade for the next 200 to 300 years, and well, that's just to store and transfer that amount of data effectively. It doesn't make any other part of it remotely possible. And there's still more problems as well. Let's say you successfully dismantle a person into subatomic particles, transport them somewhere, and then carefully put everything back together the way it was. And well, congratulations! You have just built the world's most technologically advanced corpse. To be fair, seeing as the original copy is dead as well, this does make the Who process seem a bit more genuine. But if this technology is going to have a use beyond expediting funeral proceedings, there needs to be a way to animate that body. Just like you can't simply sew together a bunch of human parts and have it magically spring to life as a fully functional person, you can't just stack a bunch of atoms in the correct configuration and have it magically imbibed with life. We would need to develop a way to bring those wretched homunculi to the world of the living. And that technology would almost certainly have much better use than transporting you directly from your ship to a planet's surface so that you can avoid having to find parking. Quantum teleportation. But as with many things, science has given us a silver lining in the form of quantum teleportation. Quantum teleportation is not a way to transport matter from one place to another, but rather a means to transport information by using quantum entanglement. The principle was first proposed by Einstein, and everything was theoretical until 1993 when physicist Asher Pierce and a team of 5 other researchers began experiments with quantum teleportation. The name came from co-author Charles Bennett, despite the teleportation not involving matter, which is how people generally think of the word. So, since their original research, many experiments have been conducted with increased complexity of what was being transported as well as the distance. The current record for distance is 1,400 kilometers from Earth's surface to the mightiest satellite orbiting Earth. However, much of this research remains the subject of a lot of controversy. To start, the teleportation is not instantaneous. Though the quantum information from the entangled particles is received instantly, it still requires 2 bits of data to be transmitted through traditional means to be fully understood. It's not perfect, but it's still more efficient, and it is the guiding principle behind quantum computing. Much of the other more recent controversy surrounding quantum teleportation is centered around two different teams of researchers. Both have successfully demonstrated the application of quantum teleportation, but both teams seem set on undermining the credibility of each other's research. They achieve the same end goal using different methods, so the two teams are intent on showing that their method is superior and the other one is nonsense. Yep, scientists working in advanced fields for the betterment of humanity can be apparently just as petty as everybody else. Wrap up. So look, teleportation of matter, it will never be real, and it was never really intended to be. Star Trek only introduced teleporters to their ships due to budgetary concerns, but even in other fiction, teleporters are a function of writing rather than of science. The idea of teleporters is merely a means to keep the story flowing. Rather than subjecting readers to chapter after chapter of some adventurer in their space shuttle talking to themselves and eating dehydrated food while slowly flying to the destination, teleporters allow the plot to happen at an enjoyable pace without all of that pesky realism getting in the way. No depiction of a teleporter in science fiction holds up to even the most basic level of scrutiny. And honestly, that's totally fine. It's probably for the best if these devices remain impossible. After all, if the guiding principle behind this futuristic technology is to expose your body to 1,000,000 times the temperature of the sun to dissolve you into subatomic particles and then rebuild you from scratch, well, honestly, we'd just rather walk. Thank you very much.